We can now bring in Eberhard Kienle, research professor at the CNRS and specialist in the Middle East. Thank you very much for joining us here on France 24 tonight. In comments made just a short while ago, we have Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu saying Israel's war against Hamas will not stop after this current deal. There were hopes that this potential hostage release deal, which includes a 5-day ceasefire, would hold and potentially expand to something more. But apparently he's dashing those hopes.
At this particular moment, I think we first need to wait for the deal to be struck. Then we will see the details, and on the basis of the details, we may make some further assumptions. I'm a little bit skeptical that we can say all too much at this particular moment. Now, we see that things seem to be going well, as President Biden said not long ago, but he also added for the moment. So let us, in a sense, let us wait till the deal is struck, but then also let us not forget that a truce is not necessarily a peace agreement, and that a truce may falter at any moment. So let us remain reasonable, let us remain skeptical, which doesn't mean that one shouldn't hope, because indeed this would be, I would call it a temporary, it would certainly be temporary relief for all those involved.
Indeed. Now, Israel is under pressure from its neighbors, particularly Jordan, Egypt, to stop this death toll from escalating any further. I mean, we have over 11,000 people who have been killed in Gaza since the 7th of October. Could they potentially apply pressure on Israel to extend whatever deal is struck?
Well, the pressure may come from different sides, of course. I mean, there are the Arab neighbors of Israel. There are also Arab states a little bit further afield, which is a slightly different issue. There are, of course, the Americans, and there is pressure from inside. So I suppose Prime Minister Netanyahu is faced with considerable pressure in favor of a prolonged truce, which might bring back home more hostages. But at the same time, of course, he is also under pressure from those in his own government who would not have liked him to go as far as he seems to be ready to go.
Indeed, that he has people within his government who thinks that Israel is caving, but at the end of the day, he has to worry about domestically what is going to happen to him. You mentioned about the role of the United States, and this is something that's important because in the early weeks of this conflict, we had Anthony Blinken who spoke about what comes next, what happens after Israel goes ahead and defeats Hamas, if you will, in Gaza. Can the United States legitimately have a seat at that table?
Well, legitimately is very often defined by those who are who are able to define what legitimate means. So I suppose yes, in a sense. But the real issue is not only what will happen after possibly the end of the war, but the first question we need to ask is what will happen after, say, day 1, day 2, day 3 of a potential truce. So how long will it hold? How many hostages will be exchanged against how many prisoners in Israel, and how will the other conditions, which we can only guess at the moment, how will they be implemented? So there is one possibility that indeed this truce holds for 4 or 5 days. There is another one, it will falter very quickly. There is a third one, and this is only one out of these 3 options, that indeed it will be the preparatory stage for something else. Now, at that particular moment, of course, the question is, will the combined pressure of the various Arab states, of the United States, a little bit the Europeans as well, and of those in Israel who want absolute priority for the return of the hostages, will this be enough to influence government policy?
And something else that's interesting, given that the hostages will be released in batches, and of course, over the course of this 5-day potential ceasefire, Israel will also have to show restraint and not try and break the ceasefire, whatever reason, given the domestic pressure and the international pressure, because we have potentially 50 hostages being released, women and children. but it's still 192 still remain in Gaza.
Precisely.
So there would be some added restraint on the Israeli part.
Well, I mean, it all depends who calls the shots in the Israeli government. Yeah, it all depends also how weak Netanyahu may feel, because we all know that he has been accused of negligence. His government has been accused of negligence. The army as well, which is not quite the same thing.
But Professor, I want to jump in there and ask you something, because Netanyahu keeps saying he's going to go ahead and defeat Hamas and get rid of Hamas. But as the fighting keeps moving in the enclave, it goes to civilian areas where the death toll is likely to keep increasing. Israel's going to come under pressure. The United States, we know, is coming under pressure as the civilian death toll in Gaza increases. At some point, he's going to have to take a call on how far he's willing to go.
Well, I mean, it's very difficult to anticipate the future. This is one scenario, and indeed it's a very realistic scenario, that ultimately there will be too much pressure, internal and external, on Netanyahu and on those who would like to go ahead with the war, that they will have to, come to terms in one way or another with Hamas. This is a possibility. The other possibility is, of course, that in fact Netanyahu he could lose his majority in parliament. And that, of course, opens up another issue for him. And we know because, he has been under pressure for various other reasons as well. And what will he decide in the short term? I don't know.
I mean, Netanyahu's job is, of course, it's not safe. We don't know how long he can stay in his role once this conflict does end. But let's talk about the repercussions for the state of Israel. Just tonight, we had South Africa essentially voting to shut Israel's embassy in Pretoria. This is huge, isn't it?
Well, I mean, to what extent it's huge, I don't quite know, but it's certainly significant. So I think one of the fallout of this particular war is, more than in the past, that countries which have been, not necessarily close to Israel, but which had working relations with Israel in the so-called global south, are becoming increasingly distant and hostile to Israel. And that is, of course, something to factor in, because Israel, as we know, traditionally had policies to cultivate relations with many of these countries, because it wanted to have friends and support outside Europe, outside the United States, also in partly an encirclement strategy of Arab countries. Now, much of that, of course, may fall by the wayside. So there are indeed risks for Israel to lose support, not only in Arab countries, not only in those Arab countries like the Gulf countries or the Gulf governments, rather, which have signed these recent agreements, but also further afield. And that's, of course, something to look at.
It does seem to have gotten the favor of India, with India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi taking on a very different stance from usual. We're going to have to leave it there, unfortunately. Thank you very much for joining us on the program, Eberhard Kienle.
Thank you.
There.
Thank you for having me.